Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back down the rabbit hole. My name is Monty Hook. I am your host, and I'm in the studio in Bali today, joined by Mr. Luke Kohen.
Good to be here with you, Monty. What's up, brother?
Good to have you here, man. I know you're a man of many different talents and backgrounds, and you call yourself a speaker, storyteller, a poet, an entrepreneur. You're a mentor, a man of many talents. I did see a video of yours on Instagram, a 7-minute, really beautifully crafted and produced storytelling of the current state of the world. And what's it called?
You need to hear this.
Yeah. That's what it is. Beautiful, really well done. So I encourage everybody to go check that out on Instagram. We'll give people the links.
Sweet. Yeah.
But I think that's a good introduction to you, because it seems to be the foundation of what is behind all the different things that you're doing. Mm-hmm. I know you're involved in a lot of art and NFTs and many different things, and really looking at what does the future for humanity and the world look like. And that seems to be the foundation of who you are and what you talk about and how you tell your stories. So what's your jam, man? What's like, how do you describe who you are and what you're all about? Yeah,
often it depends on the context. You know, a lot of people live in a niche world, and I try to break boxes and niches. And so for me, the relatable piece in terms of the broad stroke is culture. I'm here to change culture on the planet. You know, our culture informs our value systems, which in turn informs our behavior. Yeah. And if we're going to, turn the ship around, so to speak, we need a culture that's really allowing us to be more connected. Connected to the earth, connected to each other, connected to our own source, or whatever high power you can relate to. So, that's really the core of my mythos is bringing that harmony back that a lot of all lineages have in their origin. Before religion, in their undogmatic, connected origin. So that the myth of sort of tribal culture and indigenous wisdom, universal spirituality traditions, and also just personal growth and healing. So that's my background. And that informed my culture, and started to bridge between a lot of different worlds and communities.
Cool, man. No, I think it's an important work because, the world has always had powerful business leaders, you might call them. And then there's, on the other end of the spectrum, there's been spiritual people. But those worlds have not, I think until now, have not really kind of coexisted. And, there's people like me, this is from being in the teepee and the ceremony, and and I'm a business guy. That's what I do, and I think it's important work to kind of bridge these worlds. So, what's your jam? Like, what are you frothing on at the moment? Like, what's the area that you're really kind of digging into and focused on?
Community and land-based projects and the culture of that, the culture of the eco-village and the re-inhabiting the village, the return to understanding how we can live in harmony again.
So this is kind of going back to almost village life, if you like.
I don't like the idea of going back to. I think sometimes it can create this schism of like, oh, I don't want to live in a yurt without Wi-Fi. It's like, no, we can create something that's never existed yet. Yeah. This idea of ancient future. Yeah. Take the best of the ancient and the best of the future.
I like that. And that's cool.
I love what you're saying about bridging worlds, and that those worlds haven't collided really until now. Yeah. Because we actually need businesses to be based on deeper value systems, because the profit at all costs is what's ravaging the planet. And there's ways to be in harmony and in alignment and in right relations and still yield profit and support, our fellow inhabitants.
So what are you observing in the world? Like, what, from your perspective, what the fuck is going on in the world in this last 18 months?
Depends if you want to keep this up on YouTube or not.
No. You can go anywhere. We can bleep some words if you need to, but
I have some strategic words to replace other words that are quite hyper. Yeah, I think we're undergoing a mass initiation. I think this is a great way of saying it. I think that the things that have been suppressed and the traumas of humanity are the sacred wounds of our collective humanity. We all have our slice, right? Our slice of the sacred wound, as my friend Dan Regan likes to say. That's surfacing on all levels. And so it's really nuanced. There's the dynamics between government right now, obviously, and people. There's so many layers to what's happening on our planet. And so I try to focus on the individual's journey and where the individual's journey meets the collective.
Yeah.
Because that's really, at the end of the day, we can only take full responsibility for our own reality, and we can do things to impact the world. But until we're really examining how we hold reality and how we relate to the world, it's hard to necessarily even focus on the full systems change.
Yeah.
And, that's a really big passion of mine. I've been bridging with a lot of new systems people from everywhere, from blockchain to eco-villages to, sacred economics to governance to coherence building models, all the things that are sort of this idea of civilization 2.0.
Yeah.
Like, what's the upgrade? Because what the pandemic did was it revealed what wasn't working anymore. So this idea of going back to, right? There's something to that phrase.
Yeah.
There's no going back. There's only going forward. And what was maybe normal maybe wasn't actually serving all of life. And so let's look at how to move forward. And so you have this divergence right now, or this bifurcation of people that are in a trauma response and are being bombarded with information. And we're seeing massive polarization across the board from many, many subjects. And I don't need to get into all those, but essentially something that churn is being unearthed.
Yeah.
And in that sacred pause that we had, we got to start to cook in some of that material in ways that I think a lot of people maybe haven't slowed down to feel or haven't had the chance to really look at.
People have had a chance because it's a seemingly a never-ending bombardment of new things that just come out every day. It never seems to end. There's no space.
Yeah, it's true.
Which can be, like, if I really look at it, I think it's good, because the more that it comes to the surface, because I don't know, a year ago, there was a lot of people that I knew that were still sitting on the fence about whether there's some conspiracies going on and people pulling strings and, what's safe and what's not safe. Sure. I don't know anybody now who doesn't see at least the top layer of bullshit being sprayed.
Sure. So that whole bifurcation, right, of polarization, I watched my country get split into different camps.
Yeah.
Over the span of months. And the pandemic was just the tip of the iceberg. That put everyone into the trauma state to then find something to grasp onto. And so lately, what I've been feeling lately is, how do we bridge the divide of worldviews that are so seemingly like there's so much perceived harm on both sides?
Yeah.
And how do we actually come into regard for people's decisions?
Rather than debating about what's right or wrong, everybody's right and everybody's wrong, and how do we bridge those things?
Yeah. So if we come to some of those universal traditions and the orientations of how we can unpack or counsel or sense make around the state of our world or perception, knowing that we all hold reality different. The Toltec talk about that we're all in our own dream, but we have this intersecting dream, right? We do impact each other. There's a shared reality here that we can come to some agreements on, but there's also nuance within the level of consciousness, right? And our own individual dream, and where that intersects with the collective dream. And the piece that is a teaching that I receive, and I talk about this a lot with, when I'm consulting, when there's team dynamics, because a lot of time team dynamics, you have people bring their invisible, unresolved stuff into and so this idea that truth lives in the middle of the circle. Yeah. And the truth is a totem pole. And you might see a bear, I might see a dolphin, Putri might see an eagle. Instead of being like, you're wrong, it's not a bear, you blah, 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 it's a dog. It's like, tell me why you see that. Why do you see that? I want to understand how you think and feel. So there's actually a space for empathy, because when we lose the empathy, we're no longer connected to the other. The shadow projection creates wrong or bad. It becomes a threat, and then everyone's just being divided and conquered, essentially. Yeah. And so this idea of the totem pole is in the center of the room. We have to be invited in to be able to hold multiple perspectives, which is actually an evolutionary stage in development and consciousness, when you can hold multiple perspectives. Yeah.
So do you feel like, if there are, we'll come back to this, but if there are people who are pulling strings on society, if there are, they know this, right? And they know to keep people divided. Sure. I think the nature of our natural way of being is to have that sacredness. It is to but help each other. It's we've been indoctrinated into a world where that is just lost, and it is not nurtured, and it is actually pushed back against. I think by systems and society that I think has been done on purpose.
I resonate with that, and I think so too. I mean, oligarchies have been distracting away from them and making the peasants fight each other for
it's been happening for thousands of years.
Yeah, and there's actually a continuity of wealth that can be traced back to these eras too, that are in continuity. And you know, I can go really, really multidimensional and into a consciousness lens around this stuff, and I can also go very 3D. You know, very, very practical, grounded, just relational. And so I tend to, depending on who's listening or who's relating,
well, I mean, that's the thing about this conversation is that I think that there are people like you and I who have, and the audience who have their feet in both worlds.
In both worlds.
And they are interested in different perspectives.
Sure.
And how do we bridge this? Like, how do we talk about this from an esoteric, you know, spiritual perspective, but then bring it to the 3D world?
Yeah. So a spiritual perspective to bring in around what's happening, coming back to the word initiation. Initiation is a massive pattern interruption where something beyond your control interrupts how you're normally living to get you to get in touch with something so that you can expand in the direction or not contract, right? And so I think that this idea that we're in a collective initiation, again, is all the unresolved stuff over time is all here. There's echoes from so many times right now. There's echoes from the plague and the Renaissance that came after the plague. There's echoes of World War II, and we're seeing actually the stages of genocide, you know, from classification to dehumanization. Like, that's actually playing out.
I think that just the methods have gotten smarter, and they're now using generational tactics as opposed to, at least Hitler was honest and said, hey, you group of people, we don't like you, we're going to kill you.
Yeah, this is more subliminal.
At least you knew what was what.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now it's, like you say, it's subliminal. It's under the table.
Yep. NLP through repetitive affirmation.
Yeah.
You know, people hear something enough times in a row and they're in a trauma response, meaning they're not fully in their body, so their intuition's a little more wobbly, and they're in fear.
But nobody likes to think they've been brainwashed. Nobody.
No, yeah, that's really, I think Mark Twain said it, you know, it's easier to fool someone than to convince someone that they've been fooled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was having a conversation with someone, because I you know, I'm a bit of a, I like testing people, you know, and I like kind of pulling people
pushing
up on
buttons.
pushing buttons. And I was with a friend the other day, and she made me a cup of tea, and she filled the water jug, the kettle, like put a liter of half of water in it to make one cup of tea.
Yeah.
And of course, me being logical, and
you're making like, one cup of tea.
And I asked her, so I said, why did you put 1.5 liters of water in the hot water jug when you only need 1 cup of water? Because that's going to use 3, 4, 5 times as much as energy. And she said, I don't know. I've just always done it like that. And I said, well, maybe your mother used to do that and you just observed. And I think it's the case that so many people have these unconscious patterns that they don't know where they came from.
Sure.
Everybody's got them, right? And that's just one quirky little example, but I like it because it can give somebody an insight into, why do I do that? And start asking questions. And I question everything. I question everything that I do, especially.
Yeah. That's the when you're deep in the work, that tends to be an orientation. I'm the same way. Yeah. And I think it's a really healthy example, you know, to question how we hold reality is confronting, though. Yeah. You know, to be open to other perspectives, even if, you know, our perspective is something. I think what's really interesting to me is people's lived experience is actually what's important in this bifurcation, divide and conquer, you know, scenario that we're seeing. Because if we can get to the lived experience and we can get back to the empathy, and some regard, I think we can hold space for more people to make the transition into a little more closer self-examination. So like, you know, people in more of the mainstream consciousness feel victimized by the virus, let's say. People in the anti-jab movement feel victimized by jab. But both sides are perceiving harm. Now, instead of making someone wrong why they think and feel what they do, I can ask them questions to draw out the emotional state that they're experiencing, which I might even be able to relate to. I'm hearing that you're afraid, hearing that you feel out of control, you feel scared. Okay, actually, I'm feeling that too on some level. And that actually creates a through line of humanity. But it's so hard once we were firm in our stance and we had that much perception of a threat to dehumanize each other. And
and you can't have conscious debate in those states. As soon as I need to be right, that means I'm making you wrong. Which means there's no space for compassion and empathy.
Once I'm the straw man, then I'm just an object of transfer.
Exactly. So what's your take then, if you want to go down the rabbit hole? What's the word you used before? The elites, the families with the bloodlines, oligarchies. Is that the word?
Yeah,
that's a new word to me.
Yeah.
What do you how do you describe that? Like, do you think that is it a secret society of people that are running the governments? I'll use the example of Australia, right? I mean, in Australia right now, there are literally no cases of COVID. They're having lockdowns. There's still debates about whether masks are good or not. There's more people died from the jab than have died from the virus. And even if you get the jab, you can still get the virus. So everybody now knows that there's some layer of bullshit. There's some layer of bullshit. Regardless of what side of the fence you sit on, even if you're pro for the jab, you still have to recognize that, okay, well, if I've been jabbed, well, shouldn't I now have my freedom? Shouldn't I now be allowed out? Shouldn't I now be allowed to travel? Why not? So I look at that situation and go, okay, there has to be somebody above the government making calls. There just has to be. I don't have any proof of this, but it's just my theory.
I mean, I've found a lot of evidence for that along my journey, and not only from people, the phenomena of like QAnon, for example. When you bring these ideas that I've actually had whistleblower literature around for 35 plus years, if you go down the rabbit hole of trilateralism, if you understand what norms the Rockefellers put in place in the States really early on, if you just follow the money and you do actual research, you can find some really interesting continuities, and so I think the journalistic approach for people that are really like allergic to the flavor of something that is quote unquote conspiracy, because conspiracy theorists and conspiracy is a weaponized word.
It's just a word that was made up.
It was actually made by the CIA. CSI. Like, those other guys, those other alphabets. So, the thing is that, how do we stay in an empowered state in relationship to these things? I have a lot of information on this, a lot of alternative history, galactic history, nefarious agendas. We can go into a lot of wormholes, rabbit holes around what these energies actually are, what they represent in consciousness, what role they've played over thousands of years, how the money, like all those things, everything from satanic ritual abuse and how those pacts create.
Let's talk about that. Because that's one that's kind of in the media. It's in some different outlets, right? And that's something that is kind of coming out in conversation. There's always conversations around people in Hollywood and how movies have been produced to brainwash people and basically preparing people for Satanism. And I for sure, 100%, there has been human rituals for however many thousands, it's been going on forever. So to think that doesn't happen now, I think is naive. It happens now. Right? And not necessarily in the jungles of Papua New Guinea. Right? I think it happens in people's mansions. And there's a lot of evidence for that. I think it's so shocking for people that are in their comfort zone of reality. And so, what I can speak is
I'll speak from my lived experience for a moment here. So I lost my brother-in-law in 9/11. He was a firefighter, and that was my initiation. That was my pattern interruption that started me on a healing path and got me on a journey, because 4 years after that happened, my body broke down, and it was the accumulation of grief and suppressed emotion and substance abuse to numb the grief, and a combination of other factors, repetitive stress movements from martial arts, things like that. But when that happened, I had the nuance of being so driven to find out what happened that I went really deep into journalism. So I ended up adding a minor to my journalism in uni. And so, and back then, pre 9/11, it's post, but still before the era of a lot of norms that came on that, my professors in today's standards would be considered terrorist sympathizers, right? These are highly critical thinking, teaching students critical thinking. We were reading books and articles around how DEA agent gone whistleblower talking about like smuggling heroin back in GI body bags in Vietnam, things like that, things that like you don't think about or don't know about, how crack was brought into the ghetto by the CIA, things that are really exposing the corruption in the world at a very deep level in a mainstream university. Yeah. So that was new for me, and it really expanded my worldview. So this is before YouTube is creating these sensationalist conspiracy videos, and that's what I've seen is an erosion of journalism because of what we're really talking about at the end of the day is a worldview issue. You're like, how can you have so much statistics from scientists and doctors on the other side of the mainstream narrative that are like, like these are what our studies are showing, and they're just like, conspiracy, and then so it's not about the data anymore. It's not about the information. It's literally a worldview issue. And so when your worldview gets interrupted and you have to examine something, and there's the pain of betrayal of these the way that we think the world worked, it's a massive identity crisis for a lot of people.
Is it just because people have this belief that the government is there to protect them and serve them?
Yeah. It's plays out the deepest subconscious transference of power of mommy and daddy. And so if mommy and daddy is unsafe or bad, what does that say about me? What does that say about the world that I live in? And so and depending on, there's varying age groups of souls. Very old souls have seen this. When I was a kid, I was like, Mommy, why are all the religions fighting? Don't they know it's all the same? Yeah. These blatant, obvious things.
I was asking weird questions when I was young too.
Like things like that. And like, I come back from India, and then Jesus has all these yogic mudras in the paintings, and I'm like, oh, that's like, look at that. There's intersectionality, interfaith. These really deep things where if you talk to a Christian, you're like, yeah, Jesus did yoga. They're going to be like, what the heck are you talking about? There's actually a lot of evidence. There's historical books. There's texts in Tibet about it. There's texts in, he's talked about in the Quran. The Vedas talk about the 13th incarnation of Vishnu. So. You can get to any one of these subjects, and you're going to have alternative historical perspectives. You're going to have spiritual perspectives. You're going to have, all these things that interrupt the normality or the conditioned consciousness of the collective. And so, have we been conditioned? Absolutely. How deep does that conditioning go? Generational? Absolutely. Is there epigenetic trauma in our DNA that's actually getting stimulated right now? Absolutely. What are we doing about it? That's for me, I want to start to move into the empowered conversation of solutions, because a lot of people that are in the earlier stages of awakening, they're in the disillusionment phase. And if we can start to understand what's happening on our planet, what a perfect scenario to wake up an entire planet. You have a Chernobyl level event where it's going to get to irrefutable corruption. And then people are going to go into their crisis, and they're going to either check out a body or do the work. And that's just how it is. So we're actually seeing a splitting of timelines, multidimensionality in a multidimensional sense. So if you believe in parallel universes, infinite parallel Earths, there's infinite scenarios. So there's where a lot of spiritual people are freaked out right now because they see, and some, again, literature has been predicting this for 35, but like New World Order, 9/11, all these things, have been predicted. And so people are getting a little spooked because they're seeing the New World Order play out right in front of their eyes and feel like, what the heck? Yeah. But that is just one potential timeline. And so we're cooking right now at this intersection of possibility of the worst case scenario is something out of,
It's a weird time because I feel super excited, right? But there's so much destruction and there's so many people in fear, and it almost sound selfish to say, I feel excited for the world, but
because
I do. Something's exciting.
Because you know that breakdown leads to breakthrough.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. But I mean, the other part of it is, and I've said this before, I was blessed with a life where I wasn't spoon-fed anything. Mm-hmm. So like there's no breaking of comfort molds for me. Like that was never there.
Yeah.
You know, so nothing's a shock to me.
Sure.
I think so. Yeah. So you're talking about solutions. Like what are I was on, I've been having a little bit of deep kind of thought and meditation to myself this last week. Like I've been feeling a little like anxious and just kind of off center. And so I meditated on it this last few days. And I saw a post on Instagram yesterday. I think I was just scrolling and looking for interesting things. And I got inspired by somebody who was like, really taking action, right? And I think where we're at now is we're at this junction, like you said, where you've either got to stand up and make a stand for what you believe in, or you're going to perish in some way, right? Maybe physically, maybe, just your life will degrade or whatever.
Sure.
You won't live in a nice world, but now is the time you have to stand up.
We're in that juncture.
And I was kind of looking at this and going, whilst I feel like on some level I'm doing these things through having, conversations like this and, going down rabbit holes, there's so much more I can do. And I'm starting to ask myself, all right, really, what is my place in this? Because I have the capacity, I have the ability, I have the resources.
The drive and the bandwidth.
And that's what I'm doing with Lighthouse. I mean, Lighthouse is that. Yeah. It is that.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I've been stepping into that in the way that I could.
So there's this beautiful Hawaiian word, kuleana, which means your sacred responsibility. And it's really at the essence, it's what's yours to do. Like, and there's a,
what's this got?
Dharma.
Yeah, I just got pins like.
Yeah. Truth
skin.
buns. They call them truth bumps. So in the conditioned world of society, very often people are going against the grain of their spirit. They're going against the grain of their deeper intuition, their a deeper inner knowing, because we're not taught to listen to that. We're taught to ignore that, use logic. The Rockefeller school systems divide the brain hemispheres. And so if you go into left brain as a path of healing, it's actually disconnected from the heart. So it doesn't actually, it's separated from nature. If you go into the right brain in the arts, then you're going to be really ungrounded, unable to make money and participate in the world. So there's a lot of divide and conquer even in the school systems. And so the understanding that what's yours to actually do has to access a deeper internal connection point. And when we find that, the excitement of the soul comes online, because if we're doing what's ours to do, life self-organizes to support that. And usually what's ours to do is here to benefit the whole.
Yeah.
It's here to really serve all of life. And that's my excitement too. And our solutions live in where I believe we're graduating from value systems that were perpetuated by these conditionings. And even in the break off and fringe and entrepreneurial scenes, there's still been a lot of hyper individualism and hyper capitalism. And if we look at the nature of capitalism, I know venture capitalists that are multi-billionaires, and they're in disillusionment too. They're like, wow, money was cool at one point, and now it's kind of weird. It's not really helping. We used to be about creating cool shit on the planet. Now it's like kind of went sour, right? And so I think the things that we've valued over the last maybe few years will be obsolete in the next coming years. And so we're at this turning point where some of that individualistic or status driven or, even some of the impact driven stuff, if it's not fully connected to what's actually ours to do and where it meets the whole.
A lot of it's for show.
Yeah, it's fluff in a certain way. It's self-congratulatory. It's in an echo chamber. And so the thing that I'm excited about is as more and more people are graduating from levels of self-serving agenda into really like what's mine to do that's actually going to move us forward as a collective. We find each other, we chart new territory. We literally get to innovate things that have never been created before. this whole idea of the ancient future, right? Where we take elements of things that have worked for thousands of years that are in harmony with nature, and we take things that are being innovated from consciousness, and we bring them together, and we embark like neo-pioneers across the vast ocean of consciousness to uncharted territory. And we have to break those conditions. Like you're saying, we have to move beyond our comfort zones and the places where we're not looking at, because if we're not making conscious choices, your subconscious is choosing, your conditioned consciousness is choosing. You have to be consistent in your conscious choice making. Otherwise, your decision is being made for you. And that's why you're saying like, hey, here's an invitation from life to participate. Now, like last call on the train, like which train are you jumping on, you know? And there's some trains that are pretty gnarly right now. Yeah. You know, and so I believe that there's a timeline, one potential reality that we can choose in our collective dream that is deeply informed by value systems of that are founded in soul, you know, and what's ours to actually do, not from needing to be more or trying to be someone in the world and, you know, compensate for a wound, but because it's our gift, it's our passion, it's really what's been bubbling up to us that we've been ignoring our whole life in some way, you know, and there's so much fulfillment in that. Yeah.
I think when people feel like there's something more for them, like there's some kind of calling or there's some kind of deeper meaning, but it can be very hard to figure out and articulate it. And I think we get too wrapped up in what we think that needs to look like.
Sure.
And we overcomplicate it. And it's like, no, I'm this and I'm that. And then it just becomes another mask of the personality. And so how do people tap into that depth? Like what's a practice, or how can people really tune into this?
You know, I think it's the combination of shadow work and light work, so to speak. So light work, let's talk about light work. Light work is, you know, there's a million practices out there. Pick a lineage, you know, different spiritual practices that fan, what I call light work is the different technologies that fan the fire of your spirit. Yeah. So the things that wake up that spiritual energy, that give you insight into the nature of consciousness, into your own soul, and stimulates a power that's bigger than the personality or the ego. Yeah. And that tends to start to move into more of like, we'll call it an upper chakra experience, into the transpersonal realms, into the archetypal realms. That's something where we start to transcend our conditioned identity. Shadow work is going into the hidden wounds and the traumas that keep our nervous system frozen in time, replaying out these loops that are stored in our chakra system, in our nervous system. And so a lot of times people go up into the light work and they get the spiritual tools and they never want to touch the stuff down there. Or people go into the shadow work and they just keep looping and trying to endlessly resolve their trauma. We actually need both. We need more of the light of the tools that fan the fire of our spirit, so we can take that light and then go into the shadow, collect the gems of those.
That's the embodiment piece. It's like you can't just live in the trauma healing forever.
Yeah, totally. And when you start to give your gift at a higher level, you actually get out of the self-indulgent quality of that side of it. We need both.
I think that's where the greatest healing comes from. Because that's moving past it. Yeah, totally.
And so I name that because I know people out there listening can either resonate in one or the other, and we need both. And so when you talk about practices and moving forward and how do we nurture that deep internal state is you know, inquiry and really showing up to do the work, you know, and that the work is going to look different for everybody. It has to include addressing your trauma, and it has to include stepping into your gifts.
Yeah. One thing I know you're big on is ceremonies. You've invited me to a tea ceremony, which I'm curious about.
Just to clarify, we're talking about pu'er and oolongs.
It's actual tea.
Yeah, tea.
When you first suggested it, I thought that might be a mushroom tea, which I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to. But then I learned that no, it's an actual tea ceremony. And so one of the things that I've observed doing a lot of different ceremonies, mostly in teepees with plant medicine, etc., is it's one of the greatest values for me in that is not just consuming plant medicine and me getting some insights about my life and my ego. It is the ceremony itself. It is being witness to the meticulous nature and the sacred nature of the ceremony, which then gives me some kind of access to be able to integrate that into my daily life in some way. So that's why I love the idea of, the tea ceremony, because I think it's just whilst it might sound like it's meaningless, like let's just have a cup of tea, to me, it's much, much deeper than that. Like, and there's prayer in that. Yeah. Right. So talk us through that. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. So reverence, right? Yeah. Life is a ceremony. This is how often are we fully present to it, right? And so ceremonies are a way of getting present to the sacredness of life and stimulating the fire of our own reverence. When we're in reverence, we have access to our soul. When we have access to our soul, we have access to the true source of power. When we have access to the true source of power, we can do what's ours to do, right? And so the ceremony of life is happening. And, you know, I talk about ritual. Rituals happen every day. When you make your coffee, how you move to the gym, it's all rituals. It's just, again, how conscious are we? How in the moment are we? Are we in ahead? Are we in the future? Are we in the past? All these, you know, baseline spiritual teachings that are like fundamentally obvious, but also very hard to embody and like live into. So ceremonies give us a container to commit to being more present and accessing the quantum field, you know? So for me, through my journeys of, you know, working with plant medicines over the years, and for me now it's just tea, because I've did, you know, a decade of that stuff and got the message, don't need to keep up picking up the phone, you know. And so there's levels of subtlety that we drop into, and so accessing the quantum field, which is the field of infinite possibility, right? And so that's what that speaks to me, is that we can actually find realms of infinite possibility in the deepest simplicity and the seeming mundane ceremony of life. And without the hyperstimulation of the extremes, if we can live in that, it's like, you know, some people are like, well, what is this about? I'm like, well, there's stillness before a medicine ceremony. There's stillness after. You can go through the arc of all the stimulation, but why not just go right to the stillness? And that's the tricky part, is that most human beings are either unconsciously or consciously in a deep resistance to stillness, which in my personally lived experience is the backdrop of everything. Yeah.
I mean, if you're a hustler and you're like, you've got the option of making sales calls or going to a tea ceremony, it's like, it's not going to occur to you that the tea ceremony is going to be 1,000 times more valuable to your end objective anyway. So
because when you enter the quantum field stage, Joe Dispenza talks about this, why he's blowing up, bridging spirituality and science, and how effective we are when we access quantum states and we get into heart coherence and our bodies in a homeostasis, you know, in homeostasis, how much more productive we actually are. Yeah. So I love that the entrepreneurial world is tapping into qualities of personal development and universal spiritual principles because of our commitment to making impact, and where that's taking us down the, like you said, these worlds haven't converged. Mysticism is becoming more valued. That's the realm I came from and entered it. Like, it's literally like reverse paths, but we're all meeting at the heart because we need to shape the world and help shape the culture, because otherwise we're collectively fucked. Yeah. You know? And so,
no, you're right. Like, I mean, most people have had the journey like I have, which is I've had businesses since I was 8 years old. And then my spiritual journey is out of necessity, out of burning out or whatever. Yeah. So it's, it's very interesting. So these worlds that we're talking about, converging and technologies, etc., what do you see as being the most fundamental or the most important technologies or cultural technologies moving forward that is really going to help humanity? I mean, I know you're in the world of NFTs and blockchain, and you're in that space. Yeah. So is that one of the things, and what is the importance of that, do you think?
You know, I think technology that's informed from these deeper spiritual elements are exciting, because then they become an expression of...
I think that's the part that people don't yet see. Because when people hear about, you know, like what people know of cryptocurrency is like Bitcoin, and they know Ethereum, and but they don't know that this is potentially rooted in, you know, these ancient spiritual
There's the potential for that if we bring that culture to it. Yeah. What people see is some of the old money culture is actually still in that space, and it can.
I think maybe 99% of all coins right now is just a money grab. Right. It's like people come up with some cool idea, sell a bunch of coins, make some money, and then job's done.
Why meme coins are blowing up. And it's kind of like, what does that say about the nature of our world when meme coins become, where you're like, hey, you guys can, this is like, can potentially shift the power structures on the planet forever and empower human beings. And we're like, dog coins, it's like, what? Where's our priorities, right? It's a great question, Monty. I think, can you repeat the question actually? So it's like, because I feel like there's
let's talk about that technology, blockchain, decentralized finance, that whole world.
Culture. How
important is that and why to the future of how we get along? How do we live?
So the evolution on our planet requires human beings to evolve to a state where they can actually self-govern.
Yeah.
Where we can live in autonomy. This is about freedom. This is about the difference between freedom and slavery at this point. We're at that juncture, like you said. And I love that we're just saying these things now. We're just naming them. We're not tiptoeing around it. So when I use that word, and I use that word very, very loosely in the sense of the symbolic nature of it, let's just say conditioning. If you're like you've brought this up, we're naming it. If you're subjected to your conditioning, you are in sense ensnared by it. Yeah. And so
in some way. And
so there's varying degrees of this on all levels of society, all institutions structured, all the things that we've been indoctrinated into has its form of ensnarement. So becoming free, becoming autonomous, liberating our consciousness from these constructs, a culture that's birthed out of that is going to create a different expression of technology, a different expression of exchange, a different expression of art. So I'm going to give one other context to weave this kind of cultural revolution that's emerging. Let's talk about time, the nature of time. So as a collective, and this ties back to the spoken word piece of the wound of colonization on the planet, shifted us from organic time into inorganic time. And so organic time worked with the natural cycles of nature and the cosmologies of creation. It was in any ancestral lineage. You go back to your Druid lineage. If you got Irish in you, you go back to wherever. All our ancestors had a song, a fire, a way of getting into trance to heal.
It's exactly 13 moon cycles in a year, and
exactly. And so those were longer cycles of nature because we weren't sped up, stimulated. And, egoic constructs are just overstimulated nervous system. So this idea that we were in harmony, moving at the pace of nature and in this larger cyclical time move different for us as tribal beings, so to speak. If you look at the colonization that happened, where is the origin of time? GMT, England, Britain, the empire of the world, literally set forth the calendar that we know, put time forth as we know it. And time got ensnared with money, and then we got ensnared with that. So we live in a world where time is money, in an artificial time matrix where our consciousness is bound in that. And so in order to free ourselves, we have to free our relationship to those two things, time and money. And there's very different ways to do it. Again, I think a lot of entrepreneurs have a value of freedom. They have a drive for freedom. And this is where the rebel spirit of entrepreneurship lives, in that desire for greater freedom. But where we're moving in consciousness is from, this is a quote from Jose Aguilera, this is from time is money to time is art. So if we're a soul-informed culture, in connection with our eternal nature, time moves different. There's no rush anymore. There's this infinite stillness that's holding the backdrop of everything, a quantum field where all possibilities exist. You're going to relate to time a lot different. It's a lot more spacious and freedom to move through space and time because you're not being bound by it anymore in the same way as a being. And so the value systems and the exchange systems, what kind of world do we want to make from that? We're going to create a world that's filled with beauty because it's going to become the expression of our internal state. If we're experiencing the fulfillment of our own souls,
there's no hurry anymore.
The divinity, and there's no trying to get somewhere to be something to then get love. We want to create a more beautiful world naturally from that space. It becomes an obvious expression of how we're feeling. Right. And so this is where the cultural shift, now the technologies, everything that's expressed, that's coming from that space is a totally different ballpark.
And I resonate with this, and I agree with what you're saying. But I think it's such a big concept it's such a big concept for people like the time thing. And the example that I give, again, I'm always probing at people, pushing buttons. And I say, do you know where this calendar system that you go by came from? 99 out of 100 people say they do not know. Well, let me tell you, in the 1500s, they invented this thing called the Gregorian calendar. And it used to be before that, that we lived with the cycles of nature. There's 13 months in a year. And now there's 12. Can you explain to me why that is? Oh, no, I don't know. So what I'm demonstrating here is you have been indoctrinated into a world where you are just part of that and you accept it. It's never even been on your radar as a conversation. You're just living inside that. And people go, wow,
that's
you're right. That's interesting.
It's a great framework. And I love that we naturally arrived at this juncture in the conversation because it shaped our entire planetary culture. And the systematic persecution and execution of indigenous people started to wipe us out of a through line of connection to that organic time. And this is the end game of that intention right now with what's going on.
And that's the piece that feels like to me the going back in time, even though the way that you articulate it is better. But that's the feeling to me. It's like, we got to embrace that.
Yes. And you've experienced and tasted and...
Well, I actually experience it in my day-to-day life. Like the more that I slow down, the more I get done.
Stop, slow down, and speed up. That whole because when the nervous system's in that kind of rushing, we're actually less functional. Which is very practical. So you can go into the mysticism side of it because you actually feel the fulfillment of moving at the pace of life differently.
There is an element to me of my experience of time is not what it was 10 years ago. It is not. I feel it's incredible. Some days I'm like, I'm bored. What do I do? Like there's 37 hours in this day. But I have multiple businesses. I've got building a project here. I've got an outsourcing company. I'm on the board of 4 companies. I'm doing all these things. I'm in the gym, doing exercise, surfing every day. I do all these things, and I explain that to people, and people go, "Oh, wow, you're really busy." No, not really.
I'm just living fully.
No, not really. It doesn't feel like that at all.
Well, you access the source of beingness, which informed your doingness in a different way. You went from a human doing to a human being, which changed your relationship with doing. Right? That's incredible. So you stretch your capacity to have fulfillment in your actions. Because if you're always trying to get to the next thing, get to the next thing, you're not actually fully experiencing what you're doing. Right? And so that conditioning of being bound to time in that particular way, it's ensnaring consciousness in a catch. If you look at bipartisan politics, looking from here into what happened last year in my country, it's like people's attention, energy, and focus was funneled into a snow globe. Let's trap your consciousness inside the snow globe. It looks really real inside. The snow that's falling, it looks really real. The houses are real, but it's a snow globe within consciousness. That's my analogy for conditioning. It funnels our attention, energy, and time and focus and relationship into a snow globe when we're living in an expanding universe. So we need to get out of our snow globes. We need to break our glass ceilings. We need to take walks outside of our familiar comfort zones and stretch how we relate. Because people have had at moments where they've tasted eternity. Even in an orgasm, you're having a taste of infinity, of eternity. In those moments, you're transcending the self in those moments. And this is what, why sports are big in the world, because of the flow state that happens in the moments. These things already exist in the ordinary. They just haven't been expanded about or examined to the level that mysticism just lives in. This is where the mystics live. It should be
the norm. It shouldn't be that somebody experiences a flow state and
that's shocking.
That's weird. That's weird.
How did you do what? But people they're like, wow, the ball went in the basket. It's like, you can do your version of that in your life. That's what being in the zone is. And that zone is when we're out of our own way. Magic happens. Right?
I do think an access is just whatever your version or your practice of slowing down is.
Sure.
Ceremonies, tea, plant medicine ceremonies, meditating,
yoga, qigong, running,
all of it.
Whatever floats your particular boat.
All right. So the cryptocurrency thing, what we're talking about there is that it is moving people to become sovereign, decentralized, responsible for their own life, not being governed by a criminal organization.
It's called cartels.
A cartel.
Yeah. They have really good marketing.
Yeah.
They have really good marketing. They're amazing at PR. All these cartels, phenomenal PR agencies.
So I think we're all in agreement that moving in that direction is a good idea, but there seems to be so much, like you said before, so many, fakes and so much fluff. And how can people differentiate between what's real and not real, or does it not matter? Do we just need to keep moving in that direction?
Fluff and FUD. FUD is fear, uncertainty, and doubt for those of you who are not in the crypto space. I see the incredible potential of it. Do I think it's going to be the end all, solve all? No, it's like I said, the culture needs to change on all levels. Because our value systems are going to change because of how the world is changing. For me personally, investing in land, food, water systems, and investing in each other, investing in each other's gifts, and how we can create impact on culture on the planet collectively is where we should invest and vote with our energy, our time, our attention, our money.
Yeah.
Our team, as my friend Ali likes to say, time, energy, attention, money. And so, cryptocurrency and DeFi it's the tip of the iceberg of a new renaissance. NFTs, what I love about NFTs is it's bridging the DeFi, the tech, and the art into
Just explain
one space.
NFTs for somebody who might be a newbie.
Non-fungible token it's an evolved version of a smart contract that gives value to something. It's essentially...
So basically you can buy a piece of artwork, or you can buy a song, or you can buy
that
anything.
Can endlessly appreciate on the market, on the blockchain.
And then that's yours, you own that.
Yep.
Then it's verified through the blockchain technology.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's a way of... it's kind of like I'm looking at like this concept of like artifacts. When something has been given the mythos of an artifact, it gains all this value. You're like, oh, it's the blah, blah, blah from Queen blah, 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 and it's worth millions of dollars because it has this like weird cultural nuance. But that's happening in modern time where like this thing can emerge and all of a sudden it's worth $1.5 million, and then it appreciates over the next 10 years, and all of a sudden it becomes worth $10 million because there's this cultural phenomena. But what needs to happen is we need to drive the value metrics of the culture. We're right at that juncture point where we can actually bring this sort of consciousness expanding, spiritually informed culture into the blockchain space, into the NFT space, into all these different realms of society, knowing that if we stay in society in the way that it's functioned, the normal way, we're going into a almost totalitarian, tyrannical version of codependency.
Yeah.
And we all know what every single person out there has experienced some version of toxic codependency, and the hell on earth version of what that is. And this is what we're in right now. So we have to break our codependent patterns in order to create the civilization upgrade that we want to experience.
Yeah.
We have to examine codependency. So when you ask, what are the technologies? Coherence building, vulnerability, authenticity, creating trust with other human beings to the point where you can be all of yourself. And you can create such a trust field that your ability to scale and sense make and work together on things goes to exponential level. And then everyone living in their highest excitement of what theirs is actually to do, what's theirs to actually do together, becomes self-evident.
Yeah.
It becomes self-evident. And then we start to shape culture in a new way collectively.
Yeah. I think you're a very good example because, like some people, like as my background, like I've just been a business guy, right? Yeah. And then sure, I've got, I'm pretty multifaceted now, but people just know me as an entrepreneur.
Sure.
And you're, I think, a very, very good example of somebody who is an artist, a poet, but it's bridging these worlds. It's like you're immersed in these different technologies. And so I think it gives people access to new possibilities. Like people think that, well, if I want to be wealthy, then I have to have a business and I have to do this. And it doesn't have to look like anything. You can just make the fucking thing up, right? And just weave the path, walk the path like you've walked, and you find yourself in these different situations. And now you're passionate about buying, doing a land project in Costa Rica. And it's like, you had to, I can't imagine that 15 years ago, like that was on your vision board or something. Well, maybe it was.
17 years ago, no, it wasn't.
No.
15 years ago, yeah, that's about right, actually. Yeah.
But it's something that evolved through you walking a path of your own authenticity.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Being brave enough to do that.
The courage thing is real. You know, we get these invitations from life, and we have to jump into the unknown or not, or cling to the shore. And that's what's ramping up right now. A lot of people are going to cling to the shore, and they're going to choose the perceived safety and their perceived comfort over the threat of the unknown. But it comes at a cost.
Yeah.
It comes at a major cost, whether it's a cost of nurturing our own soul energy and giving our gift, or handing over our power to external authorities.
Yeah.
You know, that's going to come at a cost.
Yeah. But I think also, like I said, we don't have to have all the answers. Like Lighthouses, and for people who don't know, project here in Bali, building, it's an event space, professional soundproof studios for video, film, podcasting. And the idea with Lighthouse is to shine a light on the world's most meaningful, important messages, right? Amazing. And that is the energy that is behind Lighthouse. But sometimes I kind of I'm feeling like, wow, Lighthouse has such a big part. Like there's something big for it to do. It's bigger than just a building in Bali.
Totally.
It's more than that. And sometimes I get overwhelmed by that. And then I'm like, oh, what am I supposed to do? And then it's paralyzing. And then I have to just kind of slow down and go, you don't have to have all the answers. Look how far you've come already. Like it's going to create a life on itself, and it's, all the answers will come, but I have to be in the best state possible in that stillness. If I'm in that overwhelm, and I think this is the tricky part for people, is they feel some calling, they feel something, but it's overwhelming. What do I do about that? And that is too difficult.
Totally.
Too hard. Let me just stay in my comfort zone.
Sure. We know what we know what we need to know when we need to know it in terms of relating to the unknown in that way. But and what you're talking about in the overwhelm, it's like needing to have it all mapped or having the guarantee. People look for guarantees. You can mitigate risk, but you can't create guarantees. But what you can guarantee is that you are in charge of your choices. That is the one guarantee you have, how you respond. That you can make a choice. But
the energy that you bring to something is the resonating factor. I just brought on an investor from Sweden, and she followed my podcast. I did a post on Facebook saying, "Hey, I'm still looking for investors."
Nice.
She contacted me. I've never met her. She's never been to Bali. And the next thing you know, she's given me hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's I've got the numbers. I've done the structure. I'm a numbers guy. I've got all of that. But it's not that.
It was your resonance, your vibration,
and there's never been a time where I've had to sell people on Lighthouse. Every time I have a conversation, I don't have any script. I don't follow some NLP sales tactics. It's like it's
emerging from your soul, and so life is self-organizing to support it.
And it lands. Like magic.
I mean, even that was my experience when we talked, and I was like, you mentioned it, and I was like, oh, cool. How can I help? That feels good. Like there's like an attractor to it.
Through this conversation, also, I'm starting to get some clues on how I can tap into yourself and maybe some other people in the Bali community, and how we can co-create, especially some spoken words, some videos, and etc. to shine a light on Lighthouse. So
very cool, man. And just there was one more thing. I know we're probably in the wind down phase, but the piece around, people feeling overwhelmed and not what to do, and, your own relationship to it. I did a post the other day, and it was kind of like, when we make that first scary step into the unknown, and then we make the next one, and like each step, your faith is actually building. So faith creates more faith because you go through the lived experience of like, oh, when I make that first step, I didn't die. I'm like, oh, when I made this, I didn't die then. And like, actually things started to improve. And so the journey of like trying to have the guarantee and map it all in the mind, but the lived experience of moving through it to the heart of the like what it means to actually follow our intuition. It's a muscle we hone and tune. Same thing with the soul energy. It's something that we have to build a relationship with and expand gradually. But the more that you do it, the better you get at it. The more faith you have, the more you step into the unknown, the more courage and capacity and orientation of what that means to step deeper into the unknown. The more that you follow your intuition grows and gets stronger. The more you pay attention to the synchronicities. Oh, wow, when that happened, and that happened. That was an unknown, but life was actually happening for me. Like I can trust more, So it's, I think that metric, is what people are seeing so much value in. This is why these practices, why this mysticism is emerging and on the planet at such a powerful level, because it's actually a more fulfilling way to live life. It is definitely scary for the ego, definitely scary for the personality, but for the soul, it's like, that's where the magic is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's, I'm optimistic, and I think a lot of people are changing their minds. Like you said before, there's people with billions of dollars.
Yeah.
Actually, there's people moving here to Bali, like packing up their lives in Russia and going, I had this massive life and now I just want to go live
different
values because the world has, the rug has been pulled out from under a lot of people.
Yeah.
And now we get the opportunity to look at, well, how do we really want this to be? And there was once a time when I was all about having a giant mansion and having a giant boat and having a garage full of cars, and now I'm like, I want to buy a piece of land where there's some surf and I can create some kind of self-sustaining little farm.
This is the future.
And put a bunch of houses on it for a small community of people and maybe a boat to get there.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep. And this, when that desire emerged in me in 2008 and I saw what was coming for this planet, the rate of people doing that, wanting that over the last 3 years is like people that are just got it. Like, I'm like, oh wow, like this is something we've been working on for, doing research and development, living at different communities. Like this has been my life's passion for the last, since 2008. And now like the way it's coming online in the collective, it's like everyone and their mother's like, land getting like, I'm like, oh my God, there's so much, like that's a really nice evidence to me that there's a collective migratory pattern towards a new way of being, and it's not going back, it's going forward into the fulfillment that happens when we get in touch with ourselves. You're living on the land, eating food that's been grown there, and you're doing your spiritual practices and you're doing your podcast or writing your book or whatever, like it's enough. You're not trying to be someone in the world. You're not trying to be more. It's literally the frequency of fulfillment and enoughness. And when you're in enough connection with nature, is the value of that is incomparable. But there's a lot of stripping that needs to happen.
Because we think we have to do something massive because that's the world that we've been brought up into. And I say this on every second podcast. It's not my job to change the world. It's my job to create the next ripple. That's it.
Yep.
That's it. That's all I got to do. Awesome. And I think it is awesome because it just gives permission to not need to have all the answers.
And I think I like the idea of creating massive ripples. You talk about ROI, a ripple of impact. It's like we just got to move out of the profit at all cost thing. I think if we can do that as a place to start in a new culture, like that's a great place to start. Let's just not do profit at all costs. Maybe let's just start there.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yep. So, how can people find you? Instagram. I do recommend. Actually, do you want to? We'll pull up your Instagram here so people can see. But there's also a video. People scroll down, look for that 7-minute video called
You Need to Hear This.
You Need to Hear This. Yeah. That's your Instagram.
LUKEKOHEN. Same thing with my website. Same thing with all my handles. It's all there.
So we'll make sure everyone's got the links and goes to check you out. One final question that I ask everybody, and that is, if you had the one-time superpower of mental telepathy, or whatever that superpower is, but you could connect a message to all 7.8 billion people on the planet, one short, sharp, impactful message, what would that be?
If we can love ourselves, we can fully love each other. That's it.
Yeah. That's nice. I'm sitting in it because it is simple, but it's very profound. And I think, again, this goes back to the, thinking that we have to change the world, fix the world, do something massive, but actually all we really need to do is the answers are all here.
Yeah.
So if we can do the inner work for ourselves and heal ourselves, the ripple on the ripple effect of that, the return on impact is massive,
exponential, and it's not only for you. It ripples 7 generations back, 7 generations forward. it's actually moves through consciousness itself. It ripples through the fabric of creation when we do that work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful, man. Nice work.
Yeah. Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Guys, make sure you go check out Luke, and we'll see you next time back down the rabbit hole.